Good afternoon, everybody. You're very welcome to this Future of Consultancy webinar on pricing and learning from other industries. My name is Tim Chapman. I'm an infrastructure director at Arup. So these are part of a Future of Consultancy team set of webinars, and these virtual events include pricing, roles and services, all the various things that are needed to make sure consultancy can be agile and appropriate for the future. In previous webinars, we've covered risk and delivery models, and those are available online. But today we're really lucky to have a great panel of experts for you, including Margot of Buro Happold, Nick Smith of Siemens, and Sarah Wilkes of Arcadis. We've had a quick conversation about their content beforehand, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what they have to say about this. But first of all, here's our housekeeping rules. So before we start, please use the chat tab to ask questions. I'm going to be using that as the basis of the questions that we pose to the panelists at the end. We've got a good about 15-20 minutes available for questions then. So please, during the time, think about good questions to ask. We're trying to answer as many as possible. And we're going to keep them anonymous as well, because we've discovered that people actually are less inhibited about the questions they ask if they know that they're going to be just asked in an anonymous way. So feel free to ask any question at all, from the, oh, this might be a little bit silly, but to the really difficult ones. I look forward to putting the full range of them to them afterwards. If you haven't got time, we can try and cover some of them afterwards as well. But like I say, looking forward to a rich and lively question part. And again, if you miss anything during the presentation, we're going to be uploading the whole presentation to our website afterwards, so you can listen to us again if you want to, or especially you can actually share this with some colleagues as well. So with no more ado, I'm delighted to welcome our first speaker, Margot, who's a Global Director for Risk and Commercial Law at Buro Happold and Chair of the AC's Legal and Commercial Group. I've had the pleasure of working with Margot on many aspects of this, and she's hugely knowledgeable and really great at sharing. So Margot, over to you.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for the lovely introduction. So hello, everyone. Today, I'm here to give you legal views on alternative way to price works. So if we go to the next slide. I just want to pose a question to everyone to kind of think of these industries in the last 50 years. So the first picture stands for retail, the second for manufacturing, and the third for agriculture. And if we think about these industries and how much they've changed the way they've acted in terms of leveraging their scale, automation to increase productivity, cutting edge logistics, flow, modularized and standardized designs to make sure they can achieve their aims, and let's say in farming, advanced bioengineering to increase yields. It's clear to see these industries have changed. Construction, I think, has been waiting for Construction 4.0 to come along, and we've been hearing for quite some time about the change that's needed in order to implement new ways of working, and also thinking about how we price these new ways of working. With the construction playbook recently released, I think this helps to demonstrate government thinking, which has been guided by the industry. But I also want us to try and consider different ways of pricing, looking at the old norms and also what are the new ways that we think this can be done. Next slide, please. So I guess when we think about contracts, law, the area that I'm here to discuss, we kind of think about it in terms of one paradigm. There's always been certain ways that we have priced jobs, priced projects, looking at lump sum, time and expense, day rates, hourly rates. I think, there's been more of a pull in the last 20 years towards trying to incentivize parties on different sides. So you think about pain gain mechanisms, key performance indicators that can then be used to assess future work that's given to the consultant, or just in terms of money and reward that they get out of a particular contract. I think in the last few years, there's been more of a drive towards considering the CapEx and OpEx cost for clients, so that you're not just considering the capital cost of building, let's say a building, for example. It's also looking at the OpEx, what's the life costing going to be for a particular asset? And, thinking through the design life, the maintenance life, the operational life of an asset. And so there's been more of a drive towards some of these discussions on returns of investment and value. And obviously, the Construction Industry Hub has its values toolkit, which is launching, and that's driving this way of how do we start to think about value in a wider way than just financial. And this is also borne out through the construction playbook. But typically, we've always looked at a kind of input model. That's the current model we use. There's an amount of time that's input, and therefore we get an output. That could be a report, that could be a design, that could be a certain deliverable. And the output model is kind of a reward model based upon the delivery of specific outputs along the whole asset life cycle. And I think it's this area that we need to try to address and think about. I think, reward being measured just on the basis of payment is a little bit short-sighted these days. And so I think there is more of an opportunity across our industry to try and think a bit more widely. Next slide, please. So when I say a different way or a combination of a few ways of thinking about things, when we think about the kind of input model, the hourly rate, here's a report, the way that we've always operated as an industry, it leads to certain behaviors, and there's been a certain cultural way that projects are performed. We also have contracts that underpin this, so we never think more widely than perhaps picking up a standard form contract and saying, this is the pricing mechanism that we know about, it's lump sum, it's fixed price, it's time and expense, and these are the few other foibles that we'll put around it to try and make it a bit more of an incentive to people. But in the near future, I think there's more of a drive towards a performance-based pricing. So performance measurement that allows clients to transparently view a supplier's past performance across each of its portfolios, and then allows the client to make informed procurement decisions. I think there's been a significant improvement on current procurement practices in the public sector, where often past performance is not actively used in terms of managing what happens in the future. It is used a lot in the private sector, but not necessarily the public sector. And then we have the procurement rules, obviously, that can impact this whole performance-based pricing. But I do think it's something that we should consider as an industry. And then when you think about incentivization, there's repeat business where performance is rewarded with a reliable future pipeline of work. And financial, where performance is rewarded simply through a monetary incentive. But there's more of a push towards data monetization. And we hear the terms big data bandied around quite a lot, but where information-based products and services are exchanged for legal tender or something that's perceived as being an equivalent value. I think we know that the margins and the profit margins within the construction industry for contractors and consultants can be quite small. So there is really a need to try and look at how do we ensure that there is reward on both sides, so that there's a mechanism for rewarding the suppliers, but also for rewarding the client. And there's also a risk that when you start to introduce financial incentives, that they rely on proof of performance. So for example, an asset, if you're going to look at the asset use data that follows construction, there's normally a time lag in terms of you may complete a building, but when's the point that you get it operational to actually understand whether it's performing as efficiently as you like. A way to address this could be, trying to consider an asset in a different way. So let's say, for example, as we push towards net zero, there's a real desire by people to ensure that they can be in buildings that can help them to meet their net zero targets. So in terms of designing, constructing this type of building, there may be a way to realize the higher resale value or rental income value, such that you could tie in that consultants or contractors can actually get some of that yield benefit for themselves, as well as being a benefit to the client. We then think about, data monetization. There's different ways of processing data, capturing data, and there's a real need for us as a profession to work with clients to try and capture that data and make sure that you can actually differentiate where is the real value that you've provided. I just want to provide a few examples. So PSP, product service systems, it's something that Econation looked at. Their type of product is smart light domes, and what they did was they sold the light dome based upon the amount of artificial lighting energy it can save. So that's another way to try and monetize it. PSB, Rolls-Royce, for example, they started to change the way that they price. So they charged power by their in-house service packages, whereby maintenance, repair and overhaul are charged at a fixed price based on the per hour of flight to the customers, who are airline companies. When we start to think about SaaS, subscription and subscription services, software as a service is what I mean as SaaS. That's the application of a service deployed from a centralized data center, where you can have a reoccurring fee with a client, but also you can have a way of assessing what's the actual value gain that you're obtaining. Next slide, please. So I guess the key thing here is that we can think about lots of different concepts and lots of different ways of pricing, but it all comes back to making sure that we are aligned with the client strategy and making sure that we are having conversations at an early stage. And I've just put up a few questions here that it's sensible to start to address as part of considering this new way of pricing. What is the client strategy? What are their values? And values does not just mean best value in terms of lowest price, but what are their long-term values in terms of the societal impact that they want to have? Are there other key client drivers like time, quality, financial, ESG ratings in terms of what's the societal gain going to be? What do they want in the short, medium and long term from their asset? And what reward mechanisms can we utilize, not just in terms of pricing mechanisms for us, but also mechanisms for the client that they can see that there's a certain value that they obtain out of it? What do they want out of the relationship, not just with us, but also the market? And is there any type of ability to encourage innovation, thinking about IP in a different way, thinking about how we kind of leverage any benefit that we learn from undertaking this project into future projects? When you think about productivity investment, sometimes, we kind of think of outcome-based models or outcome-based models as being something that's sort of reward to the supplier. But what about rewarding the supplier and their people, but also a virtuous circle in terms of thinking about apprentices? What's the way that you impact the local community? What's the way that, particularly in a post-COVID world, we can start to get regeneration going again? So I know Tim spoke eloquently last week in terms of risk management, and that's a good session to go back and have a listen to. But risk management isn't always about just pushing it down the chain. It is about thinking, where does the risk best lie? And there's certainly ways that we can try and address that in terms of the pricing mechanisms that we use. I know government departments a few years ago have tried to address this in terms of making sure you bring the best minds into the room, not necessarily always just thinking about going to one company and that being a sole supplier to you. So I think there is an opportunity to have cross-consultative changes and cross-market advice that actually helps the client to realise what they want from a values perspective. But I think there's also cultural changes that are needed in our industry. And next slide, please. And I'll just conclude by saying, 50% of the problem in our industry, I think, is mindset. There's a difference in terms of the mindset that we need to utilize with clients for making them understand why there is a better way to try and price some of these opportunities, but also of ourselves so that we don't just hark back to the old ways. Doesn't mean that we completely move away from a lump sum or, some type of arrangement, but maybe we think about using a mixture of them so that we provide initial advice to clients in terms of a lump sum, but then for the future, we start to think about it in a different way. And that concludes me. Thank you.
Thanks, Margot. That was excellent, and a huge amount of things to think about in terms of what we should be going forward in the industry. So our next speaker is Nick Smith of Siemens. So Nick's role is International Relationships Director, I'm not sure if we still got the background on he had before we had the call, but Nick, you've also an extra 30 seconds if you want to explain the background. So with no more ado, Nick.
Oh, the background, yes. Okay, thank you very much, Tim, and thank you for inviting me to join you today. So yes, in addition to my Siemens role, I am the CEO of the Frank Bruno Foundation, where we focus on mental health and well-being. So that's hence the Bruno picture. He's intimidating even when he's on print, but he's a really nice guy if you get to know him. Okay, so thank you very much. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. So can we go back one? Thank you very much. So it's just really to explain my role, and this will become apparent in relation to the question I've been asked around pricing. So my role is to work on what we call an early engagement initiative, which I lead for Siemens globally, where I work with a number of consultants and architects, where we bring Siemens in as a technical partner right at the beginning of a process of a building block or city or campus level project. In fact, I thought we'd peaked a smart city, but now we've got a project with a smart nation. So we're pushing the boundaries all the time. And I sit within the smart industry sector, which is all around intelligently connecting energies, buildings and industries. So next slide, please. My job is also to corral the wider Siemens business into projects to support consultants and architects. And again, I'll just explain briefly why this is so important, what we do when we talk about the costing exercise. We're split into 3 years. We're a monster of a business, but we do operate in the space I'm with an agnostic view. Prior to Siemens, I was at BRE, and I've carried that agnostic view with me. So our corporate development side incorporates our Advanta, which is our digital strategy business, and Next 47, which I'm particularly close to, which is investing in future enterprise. On the right hand side, what's critical there is the financial services element, where Siemens also has a bank. So we bring that financial element to support the construction projects. Again, where I sit in the middle bit, smart infrastructure I've talked about. We have mobility around trains, around rail and automotive. We have the digital industries piece. We have our healthcare business, which is all around medical technology, and all these integrate into the types of building, block and city level projects that we view with the consultants and architects today. Next slide, please. I do have an automotive background, and I was banned from putting anything car related in the slide deck, but there is one right at the end, so bear with me for those that know me. So we were learning as we go, and that's why I'm so pleased to be in the architects and consultants space, particularly with the ACE, because we are a technology business, and we would typically sit right at the end of the chain. So the technology is the last thing that people would think about procuring, and there's some risks around that. But this is just really to show that we operate with all the different facets within the construction industry, but we are conscious that everybody in that chain has a different requirement, and we need to be flexible and adaptable as a technology provider. Regardless of who the technology is coming from, we need to be able to adapt. Next slide, please. So again, it was banned from using a car and was told to use a phone, which I wasn't quite as excited about, but it does kind of work and explain. So historically, you had a phone which was just used for making calls, and that was it. The analogy I'd have with a building is that fairly recently I was in a Victorian hospital. Now, when that hospital was built, it was fit for purpose, and you'd think it would be fit for purpose for generations to come. Well, the fabric of the building, surprisingly, is still really strong. But what that building does, it clearly needs to adapt in many, many different ways. And that's what we're starting to do now. We have a lot of retrofit. If you look at the image on the right-hand side, I'm the least technical person you'll ever meet. I've managed to pause live TV now, and that's groundbreaking for me. But a smartphone, really, your life's on it, and it adapts and it develops when you get it to use as you see fit. Next slide, please. So this is where it becomes quite interesting. So how we provide price and products and services. So in the simple world I come from, you've got two choices. You either pay for the kit up front, okay, and it's done and dusted, and that's quite a strain on your capex if you've got some pain points around the capex piece, or you pay over time based on outcomes. And this is where it's becoming really very much a hot topic and a focus for us. All the conversations I have, whether it's around aviation, maritime, data centers, campuses, higher education, hospitals, all roads and lead to pathway to net zero, and everybody wants a smart solution. Some of the challenges around that are, what's the definition of smart? That varies tremendously depending on who you talk to. But to echo some of the points that Margot said earlier, we really have to talk to the client. We have to talk to the end customer and the consultant and find out what's driving them and what they want the outcome to be, and not go as a typical technology company with a load of preconceived ideas on products and solutions. We kind of work back from the planned outcome to the technology. So if you pay up front, the risks around that are, but by the time the technology is discussed, it's been value engineered down to something where you'll probably get an alternative to what was originally in the design brief, and then that means that the building could have a huge gap in its performance and to what the outcome needs to be. Or if we price on a pay over time on an outcome, then that really we can then assist with the capex constraints if you've got any pain points around the capex or burdens around that. But the result in building is that the building isn't compromised. You really have got the best solution you've got in a holistic way. You've managed to deal with everything that the building needs to achieve. Here comes the car slide. So next one, please. Right at the end. I use an outcome-based approach with Formula One. So for example, you know, the space in Formula One is all about the outcome. The team will want to do nothing else than shave a few hundredths of a second off of a lap time. So when a team sitting down designing the car for the next season, it's not about the cheapest exhaust system or finding a driver that doesn't want $1 million a minute to drive the car and to save money that way. It could be all around the outcome of providing the best car that you can possibly get. And that's really what we do in the space that we operate in, whether it's building blocks, city, campus, whatever it might be. It is all around the efficiency, around the energy and the asset and the space, how the space is flexible, how the building treats the people that use it, that work in it, that how you get those people to and from the building every day. So in terms of pricing, to make sure that that building or that project or that campus can be the best it can be, we're starting to see a huge uptake now of the outcome-based financing model as opposed to the pay up front. And really, if we can move that pain point around CapEx to implement the best solutions, then that's a winner. And also you can then reduce the operating costs, which can help with that CapEx gap. So the initial investment can be met by us to support the consultants and the end client. So you've got two choices, pay up front or pay based on outcome. But it's really important that we as a technology company make all the technology available. And if it's not for us, with the open protocols that we have and the agnostic, we pull it in from wherever it can come from to deliver the clients a guaranteed outcome. So it's very important we support the consultants by operating that way. Okay, that's me.
Many thanks, Nick. That was absolutely fantastic, and it's really interesting to hear the perspective from an allied person in the industry who's successfully managed to navigate these issues. So with no more ado, we come over to last but definitely not least, Sarah Wilkes, who's the Global Solutions Leader in Business Advisory at Arcadis. And again, Sarah and I had some great fun last year working on the CIH Value Toolkit. So Sarah, I know you know an awful lot about this, so over to you.
Thanks, Tim, and yeah, really pleased to be here on this this call, and great to hear from Margot and from Nick. And I'm going to reference lots of their material because there's lots of important points to sort of bring out in what I'm going to say as well. So when I was talking to Hannah about coming to talk on this today, Hannah thought it'd be interesting just to share the journey that we've been on at Arcadis. And I've very much been sort of in the heart of that journey that we've been on as a business for the last 4 years in particular. And we really started about 4 or 5 years ago thinking about some simple things like what's the impact of technology on our business and why is our industry slow to change. I think I've cited before on many webinars that, you know, I think we're second to agriculture and fisheries in terms of productivity gain. I think McKinsey quote us as 1% productivity gain in the last 20 years, which is a little bit embarrassing actually if you really think about it. And started to try and get under the skin of some of that, and we started to experiment, and we started to look at companies that might have given us new capabilities, which is not new for our world. You know, we all always on the lookout for new capabilities, but probably more importantly, we were also looking at new ways to deliver our solutions and ultimately better understanding of the value that we can deliver. And that led us more to thinking about, well, what's the problems we're actually trying to solve? And that was quite a different, and Margot mentioned it, a mindset shift from an organisation that has thousands of solutions that probably constantly looks for the problem to fit those solutions to actually, do we really understand the problems we're trying to address in the market? And if we start from that point, actually, what does that look like in terms of how we then design and develop the solutions and with whom as well? We started to acquire some companies, so it's well known. We acquired a data analytics firm called Siemens, and we acquired a company called Eames, which does systems integration with IBM, Maximo, etc., on asset management programs. And that led us to create Arcadis Gen. And that was a real turning point for us, and we know other companies like us are doing similar things. So whilst we all like to think we're ahead of the curve, I think it's a direction of travel for many companies. But it was, what are we learning from other industries that are going through transformation or have gone through transformation, and how are we starting to blend a more product and a more service environment to ensure that we can bring about that transformation, exploit the technology that's available to us and start to really utilise and leverage that, but also be really mindful of what our clients are ready for, because at no point do I believe our clients are ever going to be ready for a self-serve design of a railway system. You know, there's always going to be a need for complexity, or there'll always be complexity and a need for technical expertise and for domain expertise and management of risk, etc. So all those questions started to really form in our minds, and it's really interesting. Margot put a list of all those questions up in her slide earlier, and they're probably all the questions we've all been asking ourselves and starting to really probe around. And Jenny, if you just want to move on one slide, another slide as well. We started using the business model framework, and this is a tried and tested methodology from industry. This is not something Arcadis has dreamt up. And we started to frame those questions in the context of what's going on in our business model. And also we started to use this model to say, what do other business models look like, and how have they evolved and changed, and how have they innovated around their business model in terms of to bring about that transformation. And this was a real turning point for us, because it gave us a bit of a framework to operate in, and also to look at where we needed to innovate. And as you can see from this, actually we found that we were innovating in different parts of our business. We might have been looking at replacing or adding technology-based resources to deliver some of our services, which had a consequence on the way people do their activities. Our customers might have been asking us for different things because they're finding new challenges or different challenges. We might have come up with a brand new idea. You know, I like to think our environment business is at the forefront of technology and science with regards to cleanup of land, and they come up with ideas before clients even know they've got a problem. So that's really where we're sort of pioneering. And equally, we might be under price pressure in the market, and all that was leading us to, well, how do we unpick all of that, and what do we do about it? And you know, to what Margot said as well, it's interesting. One of the things I learned from the work that I did is I worked with the new acquisitions, and I worked within our business to bring about some change, was we always talk about the price. We always talk about, well, how can we monetize something, and what's the pricing model that we can shift to? And the reality of it is, if you don't answer all those questions, and you don't understand what the problem is, you can't form an appropriate solution. You really can't drive value. So the pricing question and what's the right pricing model is actually something you come to quite late in this equation, in this sort of process. And actually we're asking the question too early. And if we do this right, we've learned that if we do this and we get this right, and we frame where we're innovating from and what we're changing, actually when we get to the pricing model, you end up with multiple options. So you might have a range of options. I think Nick mentioned it earlier, you give clients a choice, and we know from our experience that giving clients a choice is good. It gives them a better experience. They can see the benefits and the value of those choices, but it also starts to you know, open up opportunities then to invest earlier. So for example, if clients are more willing to pay up front because they can see more value, then as organisations we can innovate more and probably quicker because we can invest more up front. If clients want to be outcome driven, then that gives us sharper focus on making sure that we can deliver that outcome and deliver that value in the agreement set. So actually by the time you get to the question about the pricing model, you know, you should have answered a lot more questions that I would say Margot gave you a good list on earlier. And something I want to leave you with is I've been exploring the impact of the cultural change and the mindset change around sustainability and the impact that that's having on business models and therefore value delivered and pricing. There's a really pretty cool YouTube video, actually, if I'm allowed to promote YouTube, from Blue Tribe Media about Michelin and their sustainable business model and how they pivoted to give away tyres free. And it's really interesting because what they achieved by changing their business model and giving their tyres away for free was behavioural change of their consumers towards more sustainable outcomes for both them as a business, but equally from a consumer perspective, and how they were using their cars and how they were thinking about parts, you know, the tyres and the use of their vehicles. So if you get a chance, go and have a look at it. It's about a 3-minute video, but really showing you that actually there's value as well in sustainability. And, you know, we can drive some behavioural change in that as well.
Brilliant, Sarah. Thank you for that. And I'd like to thank actually all 3 panelists for being totally open and honest and probably overly revealing about their company strategies. So really insightful. A few questions are just coming in, but before we start, I think pricing is really fascinating. And I'm going to put to each of the 3 questions for a sort of a 1-minute answer. What's the most, in your personal lives and not in your professional lives, what is the most intriguing thing you buy with innovative pricing, or something that's actually really prodded you and sort of, oh, that's actually quite a clever idea? Margot, as you went first, I'm going to start off with you, but I see, actually, Sarah, I'll start off with you because like I say, it's a difficult question to go with. So you've obviously got something in mind.
I have. Do you know what? Subscription models are an epiphany for me, and especially in lockdown. I have a 4-year-old, and I subscribe now to something called Toucan Box, and it's a craft kit that gets delivered through your letterbox. And I am not an artistic, crafty person, but everything's in there. The instructions are really easy to follow. Everything's there for you. All the things you need to build whatever it is, whether it's a penguin going down a paper ski slope or whatever that might look like. And it is genius. And I didn't even know I needed that in my life. And my 4-year-old, you know, it's probably more for me because I tend to sit there and do that. Tries to disrupt because I have a little bit of OCD. But yeah, I mean, subscription models to me, the amount of things you can get now through those models, I can get personal shoppers and clothes delivered once a month or once every 3 months based on what I like by clicking thumbs up or thumbs down on pictures. It's pretty amazing actually how things have changed in the last, I would say, couple of years.
Yeah, so absolutely. And speaking of someone who's usually an anathema to me is actually buying anything by subscription, sort of. But now, like I said, we can become used to it. So it's actually quite interesting how we now buy things and we tolerate actually buying a service with a product. Margot, Nick, which one of you wants to go next? Margot, you're looking expectant. I'm going over to.
I was. I didn't want to take Nick's place though, in case you wanted to say something. So I was pausing. I guess it aligns with what Sarah says, but then I'm going to think of it differently. So if we think about Amazon and Amazon Prime, and I know I shouldn't be mentioning big ticket names, but that whole kind of subscription service that then feeds into buying videos from them, that then feeds into, they look at my habits online and tell me that there's these other books that my children need that I didn't even realize I'd been looking at. And so it's that whole thing that it starts to prompt you on other stuff that you need in your life. And I am going to align with something Sarah said, because over the half term we had this great box which every day it's called Balthazar Snapdragon, and every day there's a different task for the children to do. And it got to the point where actually it wasn't just the children that wanted to do it, but it's got actors online, and it's got a way that you engage every day with the same faces, such that the children are saying, is there any others? So that demand is now creating the people that put that together to come up with some other ones to support in holiday. So it's that thing of, you start to get that client feedback, people saying it's really great, I really like this, and you know, what does that then lead you to do differently?
Brilliant. And Nick, over to you.
Yeah, so I mean that really marries what I'm going to say, and I probably haven't gone last to steal the lady's ideas because I couldn't think of anything. But it's the feedback piece that's really important. So there's two things. I am a technical Luddite, okay, and so the fact I've managed to pause live TV is an epiphany for me. What I would say is that when I went to fuel my petrol habit and look at procuring a car fairly recently, what the dealer had done is he talked to me and I filled in relevant information for a family car, and then on the back of that is other things that you might be interested in your personal life in terms of leisure, hobbies, that type of thing. So immediately when you give that feedback and you buy something, it unlocks a raft of things, and unfortunately anything shiny I normally buy it. So I'm the perfect customer. I'm the one that grabs things from the ends of the aisles. Where it works from a charitable point of view with for example the Bruno Foundation, where it's mental health and then it's physical activity. What's interesting there is the minute people plug into the mental health piece and you start to give that feedback on what motivates them, you then go into the physical side, which supports obviously the endorphins and blah, 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 make you feel better, and that's really important. But what's really interesting there is that it's all feeds back to the same thing. And the minute you start to share some information, it opens up, and then whatever you're dealing with can adapt, and it can really help you. And the other thing we've got now is from subscriptions. I'm not very adept in the kitchen, but to make an effort, I now have one of these boxes delivered with everything in it, in frozen and fresh. And this, oh my goodness, you know, I can prepare and deliver to my family something that looks like we've had a chef round. I just have to follow a load of cards and a load of instructions. And as long as I can avoid any blood or injury, then it's a success. But it's how you feed back and you adapt on based on the outcomes that on the information that you give. You know, so it's fascinating, really.
And it's interesting, I'd say we all actually in a way during lockdown have actually become an awful lot more receptive to new services And I'm not going to mention my brewdog habit that's actually been going on. I won't know what product it is, but it's slightly less worthy than what you guys have been talking about so far. Nick, coming back to you, actually, in terms of an organization, and actually we all know Siemens, we have huge respect for the Siemens products. We've actually huge respect for the history of the firm as well, going back to whatever 1847 and the invention of the telegram and how to actually move away from Morse code with a little bit of innovation. And finger in every pie, but I'd say in our industry, you feel at the bottom of the heap because we tend to look up and respect you as top of the heap. And again, actually, the profits that Siemens make as a percentage, I know is really hard won, are eye-watering compared to construction. And the amount of money you put into innovation, again, are eye-watering compared to what we put into UK construction. So what would be your lesson that we as the UK construction industry should learn from Siemens?
Goodness me. Well, do you know what? I mean, I have a very simple analogy. My job is to have human-to-human conversation. You know, we've got lots and lots of very clever people, technical engineers, economists, etc. From Siemens, even though we're a big organization, you have to learn to adapt. It's really important that we don't go in as this big Germanic monster of a business with preconceived ideas and we go forwards, and that's what we do. The reason that I've developed and led this early engagement piece with architects and consultants is purely based on what I learned through my days at BRE. You know, people are hungry to learn more. Siemens have to go and be open-minded. You know, I'm a little bit of a, I won't say I'm a what's the word? It's like a Western when there's only one person walking down the high street and all the facades on these old Westerns it looks like a real shop and it's propped up by a stick. You open the door and there's nothing behind it. You know, we have to learn to adapt and improvise and overcome every day. And so some of the challenges, I'll mention a project at the minute in the US where there's several blocks are going to be razed to the ground and rebuilt. And what we're going to do there is help that project to have net zero energy. So the people that live in poverty in that particular area aren't going to have any energy bills. And we wouldn't have known about that, but we're working with the architect and the consultant and the financiers. So we have to adapt as a business, big as we are, monstrous that we are. Really important that so much of our money goes back into R&D, and that's why I've written some notes on the different parts of our business. I still don't know everything that we do, so I have to refer to it all the time. Just adapt and keep listening and have that human to human, as big as you are, have a human to human conversation and just dig into what's really important and what's driving the desired outcome. So just adapt and don't go with any level of arrogance thinking that you've got the answers, because often you haven't. You've got to tease them out together.
Brilliant, Nick, thank you. Next question is from Margot. Margot, you've got a foot in two worlds. You've got a foot in construction and you've got a foot in the legal world. And I'm always interested working with lawyers because we still get the sort of the fusty smell of sort of the 17th century when we deal with lawyers directly. Yet behind that, there's a huge amount of digital innovation taking place. And I think both of you mentioned in a way how slow, Sarah especially, how slow our industry has been to adapt compared to others. And especially looking at other sort of professional service firms like lawyers, I'm amazed that we still get the whiff of the 17th century, yet actually the amount of things that have been done by AI and machine learning, things like discovery and other things, which are quite phenomenal, and means that the lawyers' cost of production is really gone down hugely, even though they still charge you the eye-wateringly large fees that we've always seen. So do you have any lessons that we think you should think we in construction should take from the world of law?
I could speak to you in Latin now just to keep that theme going of us doing stuff in a different century. I've been able to try and utilize some of those, automation, legal way of thinking of doing of things. When we think about pricing, the legal way of pricing hasn't necessarily changed in the last 100 years. We still charge by the 6 minutes. I think there's been more of a drive towards trying to adapt to the client needs, trying to understand about the clients. And I do think that, for most law firms, when they're pitching for new opportunities now, they are about trying to ensure that they demonstrate that added value because they know their client is hearing the same thing from all of the suppliers. So they want to know what's the differential and how you're going to assist us. The automation, just in terms of things like discovery and being able to process data now in a way that you weren't able to, let's say, 20 years ago, and rather than having lots of bodies in the room, means that the industry is starting to move towards it. But as you all know, the development of all of this software costs money. So that's why the sums aren't coming down. But I think, law continues to be done in a certain way. I think lots of people challenge whether, you know, there'll ever be a full replacement of lawyers. I think there will certainly be more automation in terms of reviewing of contracts, taking out some of that heavy graft work that were perhaps done by more junior people, but then that's still going to require a reliance upon the senior people. So then when you think about that now in terms of construction and what do we do in our industry, I think both Sarah and I have alluded to it, and we worked together before, which is probably why we have such similar thoughts. But it's that kind of way to innovate isn't necessarily just to keep on doing the same thing. So, you know, Einstein definition of insanity, keep doing the same things and expecting a different result. That is in a way what we have tended to do in the construction engineering industry. And I think it comes back to there being an opportunity to think about what's the end goal that we're trying to get to. And as part of that end goal, it can't just be a discussion between, say, the client and its advisor. Let's bring the procurement people in, let's bring the legal people in. Let's actually think about it so that we don't say square peg, round hole. We're going to apply a new way of thinking, but we're still going to use the same contract and the same method of procurement that we've used in the past, because that's not going to allow us to achieve this different pricing mechanism. And I think, you know, I rushed through the list of pricing mechanisms, but I think it demonstrates just how many there are. And it doesn't have to be that you stick with the same one throughout the whole of the project or throughout the whole of what you're doing in terms of realizing your OPEX, CAPEX costs. You can try different things, but this whole kind of feedback loop and what Nick was saying about that continual improvement, it's that mindset change. To an extent, it's not that anyone wants to just do a project, chuck the designs across the wall and run away. You want to understand how things are actually working for your client. You want to build that trusted advisor relationship with them. So it's even more of a need for this kind of feedback loop and thinking about the pricing mechanism that can actually assist you in that feedback loop.
Brilliant, Margot, thank you. Sarah, next question is for you. I'm intrigued by large parts of actually what Arcadis have done as an organization, because I mean, in some ways, Buro Happold, Arup, Arcadis, we're all consulting organizations. You obviously come from roots which are probably much stronger in cost consultancy as an organization than the rest of us have done. Therefore, you should be much better at pricing than us. Strategically, you've actually done some, again, very innovative things over the last 2 or 3 years. I think you mentioned Arcadis Gen as one of the examples where you set up a sort of standalone digital business separate from the main business, not trying to repackage things the way the rest of us are doing. I'm just wondering, are there any insights that come from that that allow you to price things differently or better than the rest of us are doing?
I think it was a conscious decision to create a digital business, because I think we recognised we were going through a big transformation in our core business, and actually we'd gone through a series of acquisitions over quite a long period of time, and whilst the UK business was traditionally predominantly the EC Harris business with cost management, programme management, actually outside of the UK it was a big environmental business or a big infrastructure business, because we had the original Arcadis business, which is a Dutch engineering company, and also Hyder, which was an infrastructure company, and you know, we all started to come together and almost redefine what we wanted to be, and we're still on that. So the conscious decision to have Gen was we need that not to get distracted by the transformation going on in the core business. We need to allow it to live its own life, but there is value together. Equally, we wanted Gen to be able to work with other partners, whether that be an Arup or a Buro Happold, or there might be there's room in the market for if you're based on the abundance theory, that there's room to innovate and develop and grow. Therefore, actually, our ecosystems could look quite different, where we're working together to drive change in our industry. It's not just all about Arcadis in their secrets themselves. How do we work together? And we wanted to give Gen the freedom to do that. Equally, it's been a challenge, because I don't believe some of our clients are ready for different pricing models, and they've got to go on their own journey. So all the work we've all been doing together on Future of Consultancy and the playbook is actually about how do we help the market, the people buying, the people with the problems who need the solutions, how do we help them buy in different ways, to Margot's point around procurement methods and frameworks and the contracts we're using. And we are still coming up against those challenges. But what we're doing, and important for the theme of this topic, is we're trying to point to things that they've already got. So Hannah Vickers and I had a great conversation with a government department about, you've already got a framework that buys by story, or you buy through software as a service. You buy things in that way. You just don't buy consultancy in that way. So we were trying to point them to parts of their organisation that actually, you already do this. You're just buying printer cartridges and other things, bits of paper or something different. So why can't we take the learning from that and apply that to get something different? Equally, I had the opportunity through the Future of Consultancy work to have some great conversations with clients, and things like IP clauses in contracts came up, and we've started to talk in our group about, well, where does the value sit in IP, and is that stifling innovation and the pace of change? Because if a client is really wedded to having IP and owning that IP, if they're not going to do anything with it, arguably that means you're not getting the next best thing, the next best design or the next best engineering process, because companies will be reluctant to share all their innovation with you. So that doesn't give value to the client. So we should talk more openly about the value behind IP and where IP sits in that contract environment, because that could affect the price. As a consultant, if we have the IP versus if we don't, actually our price will probably be quite different.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. So we've got a question coming in about actually how to pay for technology. So the context is actually lawyers are still charging fees in the old way rather than new pricing model in order to pay for the new technology. And we obviously have an expert in this field who I'm going to come to, Margot, next. But actually, I'd like to broaden the point, because I think there is a really interesting point here that we all could become effectively resellers for technology companies. One way or another, the more we get everything digitized, the more our services become commoditized and potentially automated. There is a risk that actually we all insert your favorite technology company here, including Siemens. They provide us with products and other ways of doing it. So bearing in mind that lawyers have hugely innovated in that they no longer charge in guineas, but now charge in pounds in some places. Over to you, Margot.
I guess to just pick up on that point, I don't think that lawyers just necessarily are charging in an old way. I think it's become an accepted way. And part of what I said as I concluded is it's changing mindset. And you've got to have a receptive client that wants to deal with it in a different way. So yes, they still charge by that rate, but they're more likely to do fixed fees. There's contingency fees that have been, a different pricing structure. There hasn't been a kind of wholesale difference in terms of the legal environment. But then, we also have acts and laws that don't necessarily apply with the way that we operate in society. And when we think about that point Sarah's just made on innovation and IPR, that's a real sticking point with clients, and we're thinking about the whole life costing of what they want out of this project, but also what do they want to obtain in the future. IPR has become a real, I want it. Why do you want it? I don't know why I want it. I just want it. And so then that stifles the innovation that's needed. We had a recent discussion on this. I can't remember what month it is because the time's flown by. But what we were trying to say is, there's been a drive by government to look at IPR in a different way. It has to also be accepted by industry. So it comes back to the client demand. But when we start to think about different ways of providing services, it may mean that there has to be not necessarily a sharing of IPR, because that's quite difficult, but how do you ensure that there's a percentage yield that goes to the people that came up with the idea so that they continue with the investment, but you try to continually improve stuff so that actually it can then also be applied on other projects. And I think this ownership, this kind of mine 3-year-old, maybe 2-year-old perception of the way of wanting to own things is an inhibitor to us being able to change the way that we want to address these kind of pricing mechanisms.
Brilliant, Margot. A few questions coming in about data. So Nick, I'm going to, as one of the great big technology companies who might come and swamp us all in various ways by being outwitting us in how we use our data. And we got the examples, Sarah spoke about the Michelin example of sort of in a way tire wear and in a way encouraging good behavior and people not to actually mess up tires by charging by how you drive rather than just buying new tires. I've got the Rolls-Royce example, again, that Margot spoke about, of buying trust rather than just buying an engine that you then maintain. Nick, you must have many really, really clever ideas, some of which we haven't come across yet or are not aware yet, of how you're getting access to much better data that provides you with an ability to revolutionize and own the industry and actually get insights that are far beyond the rest of us from your way of selling things. Or are you not quite there yet?
Did you not understand when I said I wasn't technical at the beginning of this? where I was sitting right now, I'm going to speed dial. I know a bloke who will be able to answer this far better than me. So if you don't mind, in my typically sort of entrepreneurial human-to-human way, I would say to you that, you know, data is critical and data is what's driving everything. So if we go and look at again, I refer to this as a building block campus level project. Everything is all about the data. So it's no use having a series of warm conversations that are going to give you something that you're going to take a punt at as regards an end result. We all have obligations to meet. Everything's around pathway to net zero. The only way we as a technology company can avoid going out there and punting products around into the marketplace and shifting as many grey boxes of German stuff as we can. It's not about that. As I said before, we have to, and there are bound to be some Germans listening. No, I may be with somebody else next month, next time you bring me back in. No offense meant, is an expression that we use. Rather than go out there with this preconceived idea and approach, you do have to listen and you do have to learn. So if you listen to the end client, if you rely on the data, what it means is you're getting factually based decisions. You're not sticking your finger in the air. And I know all my colleagues think I make a career out of winging it. What it basically means is that you rely on that. I'm not saying they're wrong, but you rely on that data. And then it means that your decisions are based on data and based on fact. And then your outcome is accurate. And that's probably the most important thing. And I'll tell you, working genuinely with the people I've met through the ACE, I've never learned as much, and that's what I take back into Siemens. I'm the conduit back into all those divisions, and that's how we're learning. So data, I mean, I mentioned earlier our Advanta business, which is all around consultancy and everything. So there may be a bit of a Venn diagram when we overlap with some of the others on the call, but you know what? As a collective group, we almost start to create a movement in the industry, and that's the bit that I love being a part of. It's not about Siemens selling more stuff. It's about creating this movement where you're challenging and you're disrupting everything that we think we know. And if you can add data into that mix, and you're going to come out as near as damn it with the right answers.
Brilliant, Nick. So we're getting close to the end now. We've got about 5 minutes to go. So I'm going to ask each of you for a very quick summary of what you think the most clever service that we're going to provide will be. So in terms of pricing, we're all aware of actually how difficult this is. We spoke, all three of you spoke eloquently about outcomes. I need to try and do it. I think all of you actually picked up the fact that our clients, and Margot especially, our clients don't let us innovate though, and they're used to buying things in the usual way. They actually, in a way, while we know it doesn't give them best value, they want to buy things that they always have done. So I'm just wondering actually, for each of the three of you, coming back to your professional lives, what would be your breakthrough moment where we help persuade clients of a way of doing this better? The sort of little niche service where we might actually sort of in a way be able to sort of force a crack open wider. Sarah, I'm going to come to you first, then Margot, and then Nick. About a minute each-ish.
Virtual gaming of design. I would really like to see us do what kids are doing in their bedrooms, designing cities, but with data driven, so we can shape that through artificial intelligence, and you can learn quicker what works, what doesn't work. And you know, we've got all the raw data, we've just got to get it into some models to enable that to happen. But you can imagine us all, you know, with our VR goggles on in our offices or in our home offices, and actually that real-time design is going to speed things up no end, because we'll start to get more modular mix and match and more data driven, I think, around what it is, you know, and then the physical process will be enabled more by technology and hopefully, you know, more sustainability. You know, I'd love to see a point when we are really spending time thinking about how we reuse assets and not build new stuff. That's really something that's more of a personal thing than anything, I would say.
Yeah, well, so that's I think one across the whole industry. The whole challenge on carbon actually brings to that space where we have to be better at circular economy. We have to be much better at reusing things and designing things to be reused. And whether you're a product manufacturer selling grey boxes of German things, or a UK-based or Dutch-based designer, we all have to actually, in a way, wean ourselves off just keeping on designing new stuff and much more into reuse, which I think is will be more fun in many ways. Margot, over to you.
Oh, I really liked Sarah's idea. I guess I just not going to steal it. I should have gone first. I just want to amplify upon it. For me, it's about having that advisory mechanism where we're in the room with the client, but not just the client, with their advisors, but also the stakeholders. And by that, I mean, you could actually start to use the VR that Sarah suggested as part of how do you get into community groups to understand the sustainability needs, the kind of net zero targets that the community wants, so that it's more of an informative design. But then rather than just saying that we're going to do that on a time and expense basis, or we're going to be seconded to the client to do it, I'd much rather that there was a menu of options that we'll be able to present to the client to say, these are the different ways we can help you. From what you've told us, these are the different values we think you have, and this is how we could come up with this price point to here, and then we'll try a different strategy from there on. It's about having that iterative conversation and it not just being like, right, now I'm taking it away from you and giving it to somebody else to develop further.
No, hugely. And again, as an industry, we've been really, really bad at that. We said it's basically, here it is, that's the price it is. It doesn't matter, it's twice what you told me you can afford. That's what actually it should cost. And as you say, we're not the best people at doing that. Nick, over to you for your final thoughts.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to steal a little bit of what both the ladies said, but it is really about having that conversation and learning and finding what the end objective is. And this is the point I referenced in the US, where we're engaging all the local community to find out what the much wider geographic spread of the driver is for all of that, and have this outcome-based approach where the biggest thing we can do is take the CapEx burden away to enable the best technology to be implemented, which will future-proof your building, give you this evergreen construction. So I'll tell you now, if you go and buy the kit up front, by the time the building's built, some of that kit could be obsolete, such as the speed of change in the building. Problem one. Problem two, or challenge, sorry, not problems. Challenge two is that it enables you, if I learned nothing the last 7 years, the challenge two is you've got to have the right technology, because it stops you revisiting this whole process 2 or 3 years down the line. So over a 10-year period, you'll be way worse off with the pay up front piece. Just listen, learn together, adapt together, future-proof your building, and make sure you don't have to revisit this exercise and relieve the CapEx burden. You know, that's the thing. And listen to the wider audience, really.
Brilliant, Nick. No, thank you. So thank you to Margot, Nick and Sarah for being absolutely excellent speakers and very agilely answering many questions and not ducking any of them. They all actually, I think, stuck to answering the question, which again, I was very impressed with. So really entertaining seminar, turning what could have been quite a dry subject and giving it an awful lot more life. So thank you to all three. Take a virtual round of applause. I'm clapping here at home and I'm sure everyone is with me. So just going forward, just looking at the next 3 webinars we have coming up. The next one is pricing, getting the best from consultants, which is very brave of the AC to do this, alongside Hannah Vickers, who's back as the chairperson of the ACE, and also Emma Jane Horton is speaking at that, who I had the pleasure of working with for most of the last 6 months, and she's, I think, probably one of the best commercial directors I've ever worked with, now running the UK hospital programme and driving an awful lot of value from consultants. I think that promises to be a really excellent one on Monday the 15th of March. Then future roles for services from consultants and likewise from contractors. Again, both really potentially controversial topics on the 24th of March and the 13th of April. And at the very bottom, you've got the YouTube. So Sarah was worried earlier about actually advertising YouTube. ACENet 1913 is where to find previous talks and this one very shortly. So please do sign up for those now. But overall, thank you for joining us today. We're just about out of time, exactly at 1 o'clock. So thank you for listening, and please come back soon. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.